because I accidentally clicked the wrong one, so I started with the wrong meeting.
Hey, did you note that the last one, we follow the agenda to a T on the time,
Because I accidentally clicked the wrong one.
That
like
we kept saying
to the
what?
minute.
Wrong meeting.
Yeah, Marie was like, she lectured us up front. Hey, did you note that the last one, we follow the agenda to a T on the time,
Because I accidentally clicked the wrong one.
That we
like
kept saying
to the
what?
minute.
Wrong meeting.
Yeah, Marie was like, she lectured us up front. It wasn't good enough that we heard myself once. I'd like to hear him twice.
I think
Well,
it's
are we
ready to
ready?
go now.
Storage units, storage units,
Are you ready?
signs,
I
pole
say,
signs.
Chairman, let's go.
Well, I gotta get the goal with that from the papers down there.
I think
Hi,
we're good
Kenny.
to go.
We'll just watch Kenny
recorders.
walk up to us, too. Feels weird without Marie here. No. So are we ready, Scott?
We're ready.
All right. Welcome to Planning and Zoning Meeting, January 5th, 2023. Glad to see you all. Hope you all had a nice holiday
Mm.
and are all ready to get back to work and keep Emily happy, right? Okay, we will begin with what are we gonna begin with? A pledge by Heather and then a prayer by Heron. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, as we begin this planning and zoning, planning commission meeting, we're grateful to be here to be a service to our fellow citizens of the city of North Oakland. We pray that as we discuss the agenda tonight, that we might find insight from thee into the decisions that we make. Pray that we might do the will of the people and accomplish the things that we need to this day. May we do thy will always. We pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Karen and Heather. We need to adopt the agenda. Do I have a motion?
Move to adopt the agenda.
Seconded.
As
Sorry.
published.
All right. Okay, who did? Was that Dwight? Sharon?
Dwight moved.
And
I-
Heron seconded. Is somebody taking notes?
I am.
Okay. Okay. Oh, my.
What's
right.
Alan doing?
All in favor? Us Alan's tapping.
Bye.
All right, agenda is adopted. I couldn't find any minutes.
It wasn't in-
Okay, because I was looking everywhere and I couldn't find any. So we have no minutes.
it's like 2 minutes.
All right. Follow-up issues from previous meeting. Scott.
So at last night's city council meeting, we did have the two ordinances that we reviewed last planning commission for adoption. So that was the adjustments to the parking surface materials, those clarifications that that parking be paved asphalt or concrete. So that was approved and adopted. And we also had the ordinance for our expiration timelines for concept plan adopted as well. So as you'll recall, that is to ensure when we have a subdivision application come through the door, that it isn't an open-ended approval, indefinite timeline. So those timelines are now in effect. So anybody coming through the door going forward will have those expectations. So those two are on the agenda, both were adopted, and the city council appreciates your work on that.
Great.
That's it.
All right. Thank you, Scott. I guess we will move into our public hearing. A recommendation regarding the city initiated amendments to North Logan City moderate income housing. To comply with House Bill 462. Scott, do you want to walk us through this one?
Yep. So as you recall, we had a work session last meeting on this topic, and in your packet, this first staff report, if you want to flip forward just a couple of pages to the first exhibit. I'll open that here as well on the screen.
Which page?
So it's probably 3 pages in, exhibit A on, yep, on that first packet,
Okay.
first staff report.
Page 3 of 7 is what I've got, I think.
Page 3 of 7, yep. You'll see this is a letter from the Department of Workforce Services.
So it's denied.
Basically, yeah. So they came back and we were notified that, hey, your adopted modifications don't quite meet the mark. Don't feel too bad. About 60% of communities in Utah received this letter for minor deficiencies. Basically, they're saying you need to have more detail. If you read this letter throughout, they say we want more specificity. So when you do report on an annual basis, we can have very specific things to check off the list to measure progress. So we had a couple of phone calls with some, regional colleagues to say, what was your guys' feedback? Where did you guys miss the mark? And we kind of took a minute to look back at our adopted plan and evaluate it based on the feedback we received in our letters. Before we came back at the last planning commission meeting and work session, I actually worked with the state on the proposed amendments and made sure that what we would repropose would actually hit the mark. Now having their feedback and then their initial review on this amendment, they have given us the thumbs up if we were to approve it as proposed. So for those of you who were not present at the last meeting, we went through these, and basically what it is it's the same goals, the same standards. It's just adding more measurables and more specificity to the timeline. So we took basically our written form of goals and objectives and just put it into a matrix with a little bit more detail as to when we would address some of these items. So we've got 3 goals. Each of them is in a table by itself, then broken up into tasks. Those tasks are then given measurables and then timelines. So we've got goals, strategies, tasks, measurables, timelines. So that's for goal 1, goal 2, and goal 3. They're substantially similar to what we had approved in the last go around, but just with more detail. Do you guys have questions on this? Did you have a chance to read it? Do you have any concerns about what's proposed and how we are trying to stick with the original intent, but just give the state enough detail to feel comfortable in our annual reporting requirements? Okay. So yes,
In your opinion, these are now acceptable or will be acceptable?
we have an email from the state saying we've reviewed these and they do meet the mark. So if they were to reject this, I would give them that email and say, hey guys, we're not playing around with this because we made sure to have it meet the mark before we moved forward. I didn't want to miss the deadline because we're in what they call a curing period. They give us 90 days to cure any deficiencies. So we're not out of compliance. They're just saying, hey, based on our review, go back and add some more detail. And now that the detail is added, we should be fine as long as we move this forward with reasonable timing. Our deadline would be in February. So as long as we move this forward, we'll be okay. But because we're re-amending the general plan with this adjustment, we do have to take it back through a public hearing with the planning commission, or another recommendation from the planning commission, and then adoption with the city council at the next meeting. So that's what we're here for. We had a work session last week. We need to have a public hearing on this today. And then if you're comfortable making a recommendation, we would pass that on to the city council for their re-adoption at their next available meeting. Okay.
Any thoughts, any questions?
Do we have to have the public hearing first before
This
we
is-
can
Oh,
make
we
a
have to-
recommendation? Is
We
that-
have to open up the.
As long
public
as you
hearing.
open it and close it and it's on the record, it doesn't matter necessarily when.
Okay, I don't have my little paper, but we're opening up a public hearing to discuss recommendation regarding city initiative amendments to the North Logan City Moderate Income Housing intended to comply with House Bill 462. If you have comments, you may go to the microphone, state your name, talk to the commission, and speak clearly, please. No comments. All right, we will close our public hearing. Commission, any comments? You ready to make a recommendation? Okay, can we get a motion?
I move that we submit a positive recommendation to the city council to adopt the moderate income housing plan as identified here.
All right, it's been moved as second.
I seconded.
Aaron will second it.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we make a positive recommendation to the city council to adopt this plan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Awesome. Move on. Let's go on to number 2. A public hearing and recommendations regarding city initiative amendments to the North Logan, what is it? Master Code, Section 10A, flood damage, intended to bring this section up to code to state recommendation flood plan development standards. Scott, can you tell us about that?
Yep. Okay, so what this is an update to our development standards for any new development in our special hazard areas as mapped by FEMA. And if you look in the staff report, there's an exhibit on the 3rd page. It's a little bit small on the eyeballs, but towards the bottom right-hand side is where you'll see the North Logan city limits. And then in gray, you'll see where our special hazard areas are mapped in that grayer shading. Let me open it up here on the screen as well. There you go. So see if I can zoom in. This is what we call a panel, a FEMA flood insurance rate map panel. So it's the firm flood insurance rate map. And it's basically an area, a geographic area that FEMA uses to map any special hazard areas or flooding areas that they know of. And coming out of Green Canyon, you can see this floodplain area that comes out of the canyon and then kind of traverses to the northwest. This is not changing, so they go through and they do updates to these panel maps from time to time, and they adjust them as needed. But it has not changed necessarily from what it was prior. But these flood insurance rate maps are used for communities who are participating in the flood insurance program. And in order for us to participate as a community in that program, we have to keep our development regulations up to standard with FEMA to qualify. So there is a new ordinance that was provided by FEMA and the state, kind of the what's the word I'm looking for? Not the industry standard, but best practices ordinance is a template that they provide, and it's the most recent. So what we're proposing with this update is just to stay in compliance with those requirements, make sure our ordinance matches that template, and bring it up to date. So the proposed ordinance, which is Exhibit C, does that. And you'll see we actually had Scott Bennett in our office go through and add the language in this template ordinance into our existing ordinance. And the result is a document that has quite a bit of shading where we are adding the new language and then striking any language that was not present in the new template. So if adopted, what is in yellow would be added into our floodplain ordinance, development ordinance, and everything that's stricken would be removed. But it basically just merges our existing language with the proposed language from FEMA. Do you have any questions on what is being proposed and why? Okay. So with that, this technically is an adjustment to regulatory language that affects land use. So again, we have to go through Planning Commission for a public hearing and a recommendation before it can be moved on to the City Council.
Let's open our public hearing for recommendation regarding the city initiative amendments, the flood plan prevention. Any comments? No comments. We'll close our public hearing. And commission, any comments?
Just curious, Scott, does any of the little, I don't know, holding ponds or
Detention basins.
the catchment basins that we have around the city, are they impacted or included as part of this
Not at
overall
all.
flood plan issue?
Yep, no, not at all. Anything that's stormwater infrastructure related is not a mapped special hazard area for FEMA. So as you'll see, if we go back to the ordinance here, this ordinance only applies to any new development that would happen in this darker shaded area. it's very little amount in our city that is affected by this mapped FEMA area. So let's say that somebody were to come along and they wanted to put a shed or we actually had that subdivision a couple of weeks back. That 2-lot subdivision was actually right here where they had proposed those 2 lots. They would be subject to this ordinance if they were to move forward with that subdivision. But anybody outside of the special flood area would not be subject to the standards in this language.
Scott, can you show me where 1900 north is, 1800 north?
Let's actually pull up a better map because that was the official floodplain. It's called the FIRM panel, the flood insurance rate map panel. This in our GIS is actually easier to see and to pan around in. So let me go in here and show you. Okay, so see that highlighted area in blue? That's the same area we were just looking at. So if we're looking at 1900 north, here's 18. And it curves up into 19 right here.
Okay. I'm concerned with where my house was, so it's just, I'm safe, so.
Yep.
Scott, weren't you saying that, or maybe it was Alan that was saying last time that FEMA created that existing polygon based on the 200-year events when waters come out of Green Canyon? But that's not necessarily, it doesn't make a lot of sense necessarily that based on the topography that's what they would have chosen. Didn't you say they were going to come back and maybe redo that again based on a little more scientific methods?
Yes, in short, yes. What it basically means is this area, it's classified as a flood zone A as an alpha, and it's the least detailed polygon, I guess you could say, that FEMA draws in a map. It's not based on a ton of data, and there's no hydrology that is used to draw these polygons. If, for example, somebody had put more analysis into this, there's another floodplain called AE, Alpha Echo, and that's where they at least know what the base flood elevations are. How high does the water get? So there's more data associated with that type of a polygon. This one is just very high level. It's almost like someone took a real fat Sharpie and just drew generally where the water may have gone when it was observed. But what could happen, let's say that the landowners in this area wanted to develop, they could actually do that engineering analysis, submit it to FEMA. And based on those results, if FEMA agrees with the engineering that was done, they could reduce or redraw these lines to be more specified with those results. So they can be changed in a nutshell, yes, but as they sit now, there's just not any analysis that would allow for them to be changed.
Okay, and that analysis would have to be triggered by one of the residents. They're not by, FEMA's not planning to do their own analysis unless prompted to do so.
I believe so. I mean, they did come back to us and ask to update these, right? Yeah. It'd be a private developer making that request.
Okay.
Yep.
Scott, if I'm looking down where my home is and I'm looking east, you can see that alluvial fan that comes right out of Green Canyon and that whole thing. The water coming out of Green Canyon should just simply spread and go west.
Mhm.
That little blue job right there doesn't cover nearly what I think would happen if we had a big flood coming out of Green Canyon.
No, I think you're right. I think there's been a lot of earthwork that's been done in the gravel pit and it's not going to match what's mapped here.
Yeah.
Yep. But that's what exists now until a formal process is engaged to change that polygon. There's no movement on FEMA side to change it for us.
Good. Well,
Any other questions, comments? I don't think it will change until FEMA has to pay out a whole lot of money when it floods, maybe. Yeah. All right. We need a motion. So we're all in for a positive recommendation. Send this on to the city council. Okay. I need a motion.
Madam
Okay.
Chairman, I'm move that we put a positive recommendation for this report to the Logan City Council, that we follow the directions as shown here on this report.
All right. Been moved. Second.
Second.
All All right, Heron made the motion, Dwight seconded it for positive recommendation to the city council. Regarding the amendments to the North Logan flood damage control, intended to bring this section up to code. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Oh, I forgot to end our public meeting, but we ended it. Okay, let's go on to number 3. Review and adoption of the 2023 North Logan City Planning Commission policies and procedures.
Okay, so since this is our first meeting in January, I thought I would just bring this up to everybody's attention, give you a chance to read it as we start the new year. There's no proposed amendments. It's more just so you're aware of what are the policies and procedures of the Planning Commission. How are you formally organized? What are your policies for making motions, electing a chair and vice chair? What happens if the chair is not present? How do you take care of business if there's a quorum or not a quorum? Those types of things are all contained in this particular document. So just so you're aware, these are the policies and procedures. I believe you guys worked through this with a little bit of an adjustment with Spencer. And there was a modification back in April of 21. So this is up to date with that discussion, and there's nothing that I think we need to change unless there's something that the commission would like to change. They are your policies that can be modified if you guys were to take a vote and make an adjustment as you see needed. But I wanted to just have this, in the meeting materials for this first meeting this year, so you guys can just kind of step off and have a good understanding as to your role and how your board operates. You guys have any questions about this, or would you like to talk about it? Anything in this document?
You guys were going to elect a new chair last time and I wasn't
Yeah.
here.
So one thing,
We do that in February according to this.
That's right.
that's right. So the chair, vice chair election, technically, based on these policies and procedures, are done during the first meeting in February. And with Commissioner Whitaker leaving the commission in February, I guess, last meeting in January will be your last meeting. We are looking to find a replacement, and if we can find the replacement on time, then we'll have the Planning Commission, those of you who are up for reappointment, and the new commissioner appointed during the second meeting in January for the city council. We may or may not be able to have somebody on the line for Commissioner Whitaker's replacement in time, but when we do find that replacement, we will have them appointed and they'll just jump in mid-cycle whenever we get them on board. But for the rest of the commission who is being reappointed and staying on, we'll have that election for chair, vice chair during that first meeting in February.
Great.
Madam Chair, I just noted that the agendas that's listed here is different from the agenda that we're currently using. So we may want to just double check that.
What page you're looking at?
Looking at page 5.
Regular meeting, opening business, roll call, welcome ceremony, adoption agenda. Approval of minutes, you follow up. New business. What was the old business? What's throwing you for a loop there? Commission business.
I don't see what we're not doing, Dwight.
Okay with it because it says it may be as follows.
So where it says new business, I guess our agenda right now says opening business and then regular commission business. I guess we could change our agenda to say new business just to match these policies, procedures. Old business is where I was a bit confused as I just read that. I was like, what old business are we digging back up to rehash? But
Both
Uh,
sides.
Did you have to bring it?
Your notes.
yeah,
I think it's fine.
The special meeting section does not have an old business section.
A special
that
meeting
meeting
doesn't
special.
need an old business.
That's our meeting special.
If they're all special, none of them are special.
I think a special meeting is just to discuss that special. Right.
Typically a special meeting is if we were to call a meeting out of the traditional meeting schedule. So if there's something that necessitates urgent action on the planning commission's part, we could technically schedule a meeting on another Thursday in the month that is not the, first or third, and we would consider that a special meeting. But we would notice it as a special meeting prior.
Okay, anybody else? I think we can go home and look through this.
Yep.
If you haven't already. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, since we're not making any adjustments to it, there's no need to have any, motion or action. It's more just, I wanted you to be aware of it.
Okay, great.
Thanks for bringing that forward, though.
Yes,
sure.
Scott.
So we know.
Right, so we know what we're supposed to do. All right, number 4, planning commission training requirements for 2023.
Okay. So as you guys are aware, there is a training requirement for all planning commissioners serving in a planning commission in the state of Utah. I wanted to just pull this open real quick and show you where in the state code it addresses this. So Title 10, the Utah Municipal Code, Chapter 9A is what we call LUDMA, LUDMA. LUDMA is the Municipal Land Use Development and Management Act. It's basically what governs, land use in the state of Utah. It trickles down to local municipalities, and this is what we're governed by. There's other sections, obviously, but this is a very key chapter that we work with him. Part 3, general land use provisions, and then 301 is ordinance establishing a planning commission is required, which we have. What are those requirements? And then it goes into the details as to what training we need to have in the next part. Let me open this link here. There we go. 302 is where we actually get into the planning commission powers and duties, training requirements. So when you read through this, the planning commission, your role is to make recommendations to the legislative body, who is the city council. They are the legislative body. So the planning commission makes
Off
sure.
the size, increase the.
Yeah, sorry.
on that,
I just forget
please.
this
Thank
is
you.
not, there we go. Is that more legible? So the planning commission makes recommendations to the city council on general plan amendments, which we actually just did that today. We made a recommendation on a general plan amendment. Any new land use regulations, which we did that as well today by adjusting the floodplain development regulation. The appropriate delegation of power to at least one designated land use authority. So you can make a recommendation on who you think should be making decisions on land use applications. But if we go further down to. Okay, so 6A, this subsection applies to a city of the first, second, third, or fourth class. And the class system is based on our population. We are technically within the fourth class based on our population. So our planning commission does have to abide by these rules and regulations. So we, as a municipality, we need to ensure that each member of our planning commission completes 4 hours of annual land use training as follows. 1 hour of annual training on general powers and duties under Title 10, Chapter 9A. So this is the same chapter that we're in now. And we can do this 1 hour with staff. So I can provide that training to you. We can have a consultant come in and do that. Oftentimes they'll do that for free. Or you can attend various sessions of conferences that address this type of a topic. But that is one of the requirements, is that 1 hour is dedicated to LUDMA and the state requirements. And then we have to have 3 hours of training on you kind of pick your topics of interest, whether it's appeals and variances, conditional use permits, exactions, impact fees, vested rights, subdivision regulations, and it goes on and on. So these 3 hours are kind of up to your discretion, whatever floats your boat. You can usually get these training topics covered at conferences. Staff can provide you with that training. You can find trainings online, but I can help you guys find those to satisfy those requirements. Any newly appointed planning commission member cannot participate until they do at least 1 hour of training before they vote on any topics. So our new planning commissioner will be given that hour of training before they jump into regular business. Okay.
I still haven't had that hour of training yet.
Me either.
Nor am I.
We'll note that and we'll make sure you sit through a nice
Everything I
long.
voted for doesn't matter. It's all null and void.
I don't know. if any-
Does that mean meeting adjourned?
Well, maybe this,
I can't even adjourn the meeting.
Neither can I.
We're gonna be stuck here forever.
It's like Congress.
in perpetuity.
Room.
Oh,
No heating.
Oh, no. But you do get 1 hour of your training checked off if you attend at least 12 meetings during the year. So
Oh.
if you come to one meeting every month, you could skip half the meetings during the year. You could still check off 1 hour technically.
Okay.
So, and then it says, we can provide the training through staff. You can attend the Utah League of Cities and Towns. They are an endorsed body to give you some training, or, training courses that are online through a couple of different divisions. But then for me, in item F, we have to, for each planning commissioner, we have to monitor your compliance and maintain a record of your completion. So we've got a nice little tracker for all of our planning commissioners here, and we can verify that you guys have taken enough training courses. So as you guys complete training, let me know. We'll write it down. We'll keep a record, and we'll just make sure that if anybody were to contest whether or not you are eligible to make the decisions you're making, we'll have this in our back pocket, and you guys can feel more confident in your role as a commissioner. So
So do you want us to let you know by editing this spreadsheet or just like send you an email?
let me know. I'll fill this out.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll keep this record internally
Can this meeting,
We were trained tonight.
can this meeting count as a little bit of a?
as a training. Yeah, maybe a little bit. On Ludma, that 1 hour, we could count, a little bit of time towards it. If you guys want, and we talked about this a couple months ago as I was first starting, the Open and Public Meetings Act is available for you guys to take as an online training, gives you a certificate. You guys can take that, hand that certificate over. We can mark that down. The Utah Leagues of Cities and Town, that is a good resource as well. They've got training materials on their website. And then one entity that is not listed in state code, and I'm surprised it's not, but the American Planning Association has a plethora of training materials. So these links are in the meeting folder. If you guys want to click through them and look to see what those resources may have, feel free. I'll leave that in the folder so you can access it at any time. But that's your training requirement for the year, and you have to do it on an annual basis. So we'll keep track of that. If I feel like we're lagging behind, I'll bring in training materials and we can sit down and do them together and make sure everybody gets what they need. Do you have any questions on that requirement?
So with the, I did that Open and Public Meetings Act video.
Uh-huh.
And you got a little certificate. Do you have to redo that every year?
I don't know if it's a rolling calendar year. I mean, you took it like 3 months ago, right?
I did it a year ago.
Was it a year? So the 4 hours, it repeats every year. So you can take it again and count it towards 1 more hour of this year's requirement, or you can pick other training topics if you want to do other training topics, if you feel like it's still recent enough and you don't really want to take it again. But yeah, you do have to do 4 hours every year, and one of those hours has to be the LEDMA topic.
Okay.
Yep.
So how many hours are we spending? How many days are we spending looking at these meetings?
So if you come to the meetings, if you come to at least 12 meetings during the year, then you can check off 1 hour of training time. So technically, if you plan to be here at least, half the year's worth of meetings, you only have 3 more hours of training, one of which has to be the LEDMA topic, and then 2 hours are kind of a la carte, whatever you choose.
So we can go to these meetings here that are listed.
Those are links to different entities that provide training. So the Utah League of Cities and Towns and the American Planning Association, their websites have a plethora of training material, and you can jump in and read some of that. Or if you want to attend one of the Utah League of Cities and Towns conferences during the year, there's 2 of them. You're welcome to do that. We'll pay for your fees to attend that meeting. And you could check it all off at once if you'd like to do it that way as well.
What happens if nobody does it?
Well, so that's where, and I've seen this actually happen at Weber County where there was a contentious topic on the agenda. And we had a new planning commissioner that was appointed the week prior, and somebody asked, did you guys complete the first hour of training for them to be eligible for this discussion? Yes or no? And so it can come up. And if it's scrutinized and, it's found that you're not in compliance, then they could contest that in court and say your decision needs to be reheard by the planning commission once they're fully staffed with eligible commissioners.
Well, okay,
So let's check the box.
yeah, all right.
Yep.
Any more questions about that, people? So go look through your thing, and it was actually fine. The thing I did. It'd be okay to do again.
Yeah, I did that too.
So yeah,
Not
I did
fun,
the
fine.
Open and Public Meetings Act training like 3 months ago, but you're saying,
We need to do it.
You
I
have to
mean,
do
if I had a preference, I'd probably rather learn something new, but you're saying I would be okay to do that.
I think so. Yeah,
Okay.
because as it says in the state code, you have to have at least 1 hour on LUDMA. LUDMA is not open meetings act. So choose from those topics, but one has to be from LUDMA. If you guys want, I'd be happy to provide that LUDMA training. It's not super exciting, but it's important. It's kind of the nuts and bolts of how we operate as a planning commission, what your role is as a recommending body, but you're also the land use authority on some of the decisions that are administrative in nature, like conditional use permits. You guys have the final say on those. But yeah, we could probably do that in a formal planning commission meeting if you'd like to do it together. There's resources if you want to sit down and do it by yourself too. So whatever you guys prefer.
I
Scott,
think
it
it's
might
good.
be helpful to have a recommendation from staff in terms of what areas
Yeah.
might be most helpful.
And I
Well, I would say out of this a la carte menu,
Prioritize, if you will, a little bit.
yeah. I would say the things that you'll actually be dealing with most are conditional use permits. Not even improvement guarantees, but subdivision regulations. Property rights. Density. And zoning.
Well, it's gonna be uncovered under subdivision and zoning.
Those are, I think, probably the more common items that you'll be faced with, but all these things could come to your agenda at one point or another.
Thanks, Scott. It is good to kind of have some kind of training, especially when you first get in, because you don't know what's going on.
I would want to know, does everyone want to do a group LEDMA or individual? Because I think that'd be nice to know in advance.
We can get together.
Or if you want to do it by yourselves, I can provide you with maybe some hand selected materials if you want to do it on your own. I'm happy to do either.
I like doing it together. I think
I think then you can
some
have
of the
questions.
questions the other commissioners ask always help me, so.
But it would have to be done in a public.
It'd be a public meeting. Doesn't have to
Yeah.
be a public
We
hearing.
can't meet- we can't meet together outside.
Right,
Only
yes.
with other.
So we could do it in a meeting like this.
It'd be just a work session item.
I think that's,
That would
And we'll,
be good if we could take the meeting and.
yeah, maybe what we'll do is I'll throw some materials together. We'll put it on an agenda, maybe February, March, after we get our new planning commissioner on board, and we'll check
Okay.
that box.
Sounds good.
Cool.
All right. Discussion of planning commission goals. I think one of our goals is to get ourselves trained. There you go.
That's-
We gotta go.
Okay, let me pull this up. This is also a paper in your packet here if you want to look at it on a easier to read piece of paper. Okay, planning commission goals. Obviously, we're first meeting in January. It seems appropriate to talk about goals, right? What are we going to try to achieve this year? One thing that's unique is, I guess, a new planning director coming into, the municipality is kind of seeing where you are in the general plan. That's, every community has a general plan. Every community is at a certain point in their implementation process of their general plan. Some communities are just getting started, like Hyde Park, for example, just adopted their general plan, and now they're moving into the implementation phase where they're actually looking to execute on their planning goals. North Logan, our general plan is, it's a bit crusty. It's, a decade old, and I don't know that necessarily we have been using it as an implementation document that we're kind of using to check off tasks. Maybe I'm wrong, but typically a general plan has goals, policies, implementation strategies, just like you saw with our moderate income housing plan. We have very specific line items and tasks to achieve in certain timelines. When we go through our new general plan, we'll have an implementation plan associated with the general plan where we'll actually use that as a matrix on a year-by-year basis to prioritize our staff time and our planning commission time to achieve those desired outcomes. So what I would like to do once a general plan is implemented is to use that in our annual goal setting to say, okay, the general plan says we should try to achieve X, Y, and Z within this time frame, and then we can set up an effort from planning staff, the city planning commission, city council to actually achieve those goals. But because our general plan right now is a bit crusty and we know we're going to be updating it soon, as we go into 2023, I don't know necessarily it makes sense to take our older general plan and try to drag it through the implementation process, with exception to the moderate income housing element that has been updated. And we do have some goals that have timelines in 2023. So I drafted this goals sheet as kind of a rough start to maybe some goals, and then have it for some discussion with the planning commission. The first we already talked about. Let's make sure we complete our training and make sure that you guys are comfortable in your role. So as we address various topics, you know what you're up to, and you feel confident in making your decisions. So I did put this as, a goal. It doesn't have to be our number one goal, but I'd like to make sure it's something that we keep in front of us so we can achieve it. So we already talked about the 4 hours of completion. There is a book that I think is extremely helpful, and it's not tremendously arduous to get through. It's a handbook that was written specifically for Utah land use regulation. Craig M. Call, he's a local land use attorney. He's been working in land use law for decades, and he wrote this book. You might have seen it already, Ground Rules. If you'd like to, and you wanted to read through this, you'd probably be more educated than any planning commissioner in the state if you got from the beginning to the end. I don't know if you want to set that goal for each other, if you'd like to read it or not, but it might be a good way for you to feel comfortable.
Do you guys have that?
Yeah. we do.
I do know.
Did you get a copy of it?
Doesn't have it.
It's perfect. I mean, it gives you examples. It tells you exactly what different decisions you'd be working in.
I'll get through it, I'll be excused from this.
Life?
And I'm sure you could count this towards your hours of training if you wanted to sit down and read it, or just portions of it you could use as well. I wrote on here, hey, if you want to read it, great. It might be a goal we could set. I don't want to obligate you to doing precisely that if you don't want to, but it could be a good goal to make.
Would that count as the LUTMA hour?
It absolutely would.
Okay.
Yeah. Because it basically sticks to the LEDMA topics of, local land use and how does it work? How does it function in local government? Yep. So that was a goal, let's get trained up. This is an item that you could use towards your training. Our second goal, this is more staff initiated, but it will definitely become a lot more planning commission intensive as the year goes on. But we've already technically initiated our general plan process by looking for funding. We've started compiling some documents to put together an RFP. So as you'll see, number one, we need to come up with money. Number two, we need to get an RFP together and select a consultant. And then we need to start doing visioning and data collection as part of the general plan process. And if we can get this kicked off, in the third or fourth quarter of this year, we would be right in the middle of it by, August timeframe. So I guess a goal from the planning commission is that we go ahead and initiate a general plan update. This will be taking a lot of time. This takes a considerable amount of staff time, planning commission time, and it's about a year and a half long process, start to finish. And so I don't want to give us too many tasks to complete when you're in the middle of a general plan update, because it is a lot of effort. But that kind of goes through, says we'll look for grants in the first quarters. We'll go through the municipal budgeting process, which will be the next couple of months. We'll put out an RFP and try to select a consultant in the middle of the year, and then we'll start visioning and data collection in Q3 and 4 of 23. That makes sense on this second goal.
So we bring a consultant in because of the time intense
They will
nature
do
of
a-
the task and
Right, they'll do a lot of the technical work on the general plan, and we will be a sounding board for them. We will help them hold public hearings. We'll give them comments. We'll have multiple read-throughs of any draft documents with your input on how those documents are coming together. We'll hold open houses for public involvement, surveys, those types of things. But they're the ones working behind the scenes to put all of that data collection into something that's actually digestible. They'll be writing the technical chapters with our guidance, putting together technical exhibits, maps, graphs, those types of things, projections. Those are all things that we will have our fingerprint on for sure, but their technical expertise and extra manpower is what you're basically paying for.
And that's something we already have funding available to pay or cover this.
It's not a cheap endeavor.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
like, do we have the funding set aside?
We don't at present. So we did submit for some grant funds, and if we're awarded those funds, we'll know by Q2.
And that's when the next steps would happen.
Yeah,
we
if-
get the grant.
If we don't get that grant funding, then we would probably still start the general plan. We would just have to take it a little bit slower and spread it over multiple fiscal years to budget for it.
Hmm.
It's doable, but we'd have to, in our municipal budgeting, would have to identify that need and then work it into the budget.
Gotcha.
is
Yeah.
that a state level grant that we
Yeah.
submitted for?
It's the grant that we submitted for is a UDOT grant for some technical assistance, and it's for any planning effort. So we'll see where that goes.
Gotcha.
Yep.
That makes sense.
So that's a big goal on our end. If we can stick to this timeline, that would be great. We'll see. The next goal, I kind of talked about this briefly at the onset, but from a general plan implementation standpoint, we would technically, in any normal, I guess, situation where we're not working on a general plan, we would take our existing general plan, we would work on implementation strategies. Right now, the only thing I think that makes sense from a general plan implementation is our moderate income housing component that has some tasks for us to achieve in 23. So that's what I wrote down here, is that we do those tasks that we had indicated we would do in 23, such as holding joint workshops to potentially identify some upzone areas, and maybe even hold a couple of public hearings to consider upzoning those parcels, but knowing that we need to work on water infrastructure first. So that's a caveat on that if we actually undertake that task. Do you guys have any questions on that third topic?
No.
Okay. Do you as a planning commission have any specific goals you would like to address in 2023? Anything that is just burning a hole in your pocket that you'd like to take a look at as a commission?
Well, I think that, like on number 3, water infrastructure, water is a biggie
Mhm.
that we could be learning about, thinking about, informed about.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go back to our moderate income housing language real quick, just to show. Let's see, where did we put this? I think it's in our third goal here. Completion of an updated water infrastructure capacity assessment.
Yeah.
So that's all contingent on actually getting the infrastructure in place first. And once the water's flowing, we can do an assessment as to what our capacity is going to be. In our timeline, we had said, hey, we'll do it as soon as we can, but it's contingent on actually getting the well dug, getting those improvements, the well house and the pump installed. And that's kind of out of our control. We're subject to the timeline of contractors and materials availability, and we're not sure exactly when that will come to fruition. But when it does, yeah, we'll measure the water that we're able to get out of it, and then we can do some planning from there.
Scott, on that, one that you mentioned, the new well that's being dug, has that been proven and certified, or are we still?
We're still in the initial stages of that. We have a contractor selected to drill the well. They should be there soon. We are working on getting bids on the well house itself, which once the well is dug and you have, the well house and the mechanical equipment that is installed into the well, pumps and power and those types of things to actually make the well function. And then from there, we have water lines we have to install and, some storage tanks that need to be installed. It's going to take some time, but we're working towards that.
I think we have some good goals here to work on. I think we have a lot. And I don't feel a need to add any more at this point unless we accomplish one and then we can add something else.
Yeah.
That's my personal opinion. Anybody?
Of course, we'll have day-to-day business that is mixed in with it, depending on what applications come through the doors. That'll keep us busy, I'm sure, once the summer months come around. We're in kind of the lull in the year where, we don't have a lot of applications to the winter, but it'll pick up. Yeah,
Mhm.
wait until, April, March.
Yeah.
Scott, remind me, what are we referring to when we talk about up zone areas?
So that's where we would increase density in selected
Yeah.
areas. Remember, we had talked about one of our goals in the moderate income housing is to hold a work session with the city council, identify potential candidate areas for rezoning or upzoning.
Yeah.
And if we find some that may be good candidates, then we'd have more discussion on how do we get water to them and, what would be the appropriate zoning for them given their location.
Mhm.
That's an upzone where we would increase the density through a rezone process.
Right. A couple of years ago, or maybe it's only been a year or so ago, we were considering taking a look at all of anything that was over an acre that might be considered for different zoning.
Mhm.
And that's one thing we can address when it's on here. to
Yeah.
address.
Through the general plan process, you would typically do an analysis of what's our existing land use. And you would take all of the undeveloped land, identify what its current zoning is. What does that look like if we leave it as it's currently zoned?
Mhm.
What's build out basically? How many units can you accommodate in your city if we were to develop everything that is undeveloped today at its base density on its current zoning? The general plan is an opportunity for us to look at future growth. What is the projected growth? Where do you put all of those anticipated units, and then identifying areas for various changes in zoning to accommodate the growth, knowing that you want to balance growth, open space, agriculture, all those things have to be balanced. So there will be growth in certain areas that we identify, and other areas we could look to potentially protect. That's a process through the general plan.
Great. Any other thoughts, comments? Okay, thank you, Scott. Thank
Yep.
you for writing these out for us. I think gives us some good things to work on.
Good data.
Very good.
All right. Let's go to number 4, planning commission training requirements. I think we've talked about that. Discussion of plan, I think we're down to staff business / discussion.
I do have 2 quick questions for everybody. What, and maybe we'll actually off the record have you tell me, but I want to make sure I have your correct contact information. Just so I know how to best get a hold of everybody, whether that's text message or email or phone call. I just would prefer to know what's your preference. So I'll get with you after the record, so your contact information isn't on the public record, but that's one thing I'd like to grab. The other thing is, we talked a little while back when we had our signage discussion about potentially putting together a subcommittee to discuss future signage, branding, wayfinding. And my recollection is poor and I apologize. I remember we had Commissioner Erickson express some interest, if I'm not
Sure, I'll
mistaken.
do it. I'm
Was-
pretty sure Jeff really wants to do that.
I seem
Jeff
to
said
remember
he
there
does
was
it.
one more planning commissioner who had expressed interest, but I can't for the life of me remember.
Was not me.
Do you recall? I do know, so the city council did have a little bit of a formal discussion on this where the mayor had requested that Buzzy Mullikel and Joni Karchner from the city council sit on that subcommittee. But I can't remember exactly who had volunteered or expressed interest on the planning commission.
I will do it if nobody's gonna fess up.
I don't remember.
I'm bored.
Okay,
You put me down.
perfect. Yeah, we'll hold just, I guess, an initial meeting with the subcommittee, identify maybe some meeting times, set some parameters, and we'll go from there.
Okay. All right, next agenda, set next agenda, we've done that. Any more business? Think we don't have any more business to talk about?
Just for the next meeting, just
Yeah.
a point of reference, I will not be able to be present for the next meeting.
And the next meeting is January,
19.
Yeah, the 19th.
19th, yep.
okay. Kenny will be gone. He's gonna get nominated to be chief. Oh, that's right.
That makes sense.
All right, I think we need a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
A second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye.